I beg to move that this House do now adjourn.
The question is that this House do now adjourn. Chris Coghlan.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. I welcome many aspects of the SEND White Paper, especially around early intervention and increased funding. We know that most local authority SEND staff care deeply, and we are grateful to them for that. The local authority SEND funding is chronically underfunded, and too often that has led to corner cutting, a culture of dishonesty and brutalisation. I fear the government has seriously underestimated the scale of harm. One mum wrote on my Facebook page, "My daughter is self-harming and suicidal. EHCP behind by weeks. Discharged by CAMS as the educational setting is the main reason for the mental health struggles, and this has to change before any work can be done. We are just left watching our children suffer. How is breaking the law by all these services allowed and not prosecuted?" To this point, Matthew Purchase, KC, has written about the school's white paper. A lot of good intentions, but which, on the face of it, are going to reduce the ability for children and families to enforce what they are legally entitled to. Last week, I published with The Times 20 cases of avoidable SEND child suicide caused by failures by local authorities. All 20 of these children would have had their EHCP rights removed under the government's plans, and so potentially being even more vulnerable. 3 of their mums have asked me to speak about their children. Patricia Alban, who is here, her son Sammy was autistic. His local authority removed his EHCP. Despite 13 referrals by the police to the council, they refused to provide him with any of the support he needed. After a history of suicide attempts, Sammy died aged 13, falling off a harbour wall. His inquest concluded he died from inadequate support from the local authority and mental health services. My constituent, Jen Briggs-Chalkley, started college in October 2021. She was 17 and had been diagnosed with autism and ADHD. Her local authority failed to update the college in her EHCP about her risk of suicide. 1 month later, she was dead. Her 81-page inquest detailed continuous and prolonged failures by her local authority to provide the support she needed. Evie White. She was 13 when she killed herself after years of failures and denials by her local authority to provide the support she needed for her autism. Her older sister found her body. She had to continue sleeping in the same bedroom in which Evie hanged herself because the local authority would not provide new housing. 6 months later, Evie's best friend killed herself, aged 13. These are just 3 of over 200 testimonies which I have received in relation to avoidable SEND child suicide. An epidemic. Madam Deputy Speaker, it is our country's duty to protect our most vulnerable citizens. How can the government even consider cutting children's rights?
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker, and thank you to the honourable member for Dorking and Horley for that powerful and sobering speech and for securing this debate. I know we've talked previously about the research that the Honourable Member has done, which is heartbreaking and demonstrates so powerfully the need for change. And I know that we've arranged a date for me to come and speak to some of the families that the Honourable Member is working with, and to families that are here today. I'm very happy to make time to talk to them afterwards. It's just an unimaginable loss, and as the Honourable Member has set out, the 200 stories that they have gathered, but I understand also thousands of stories beyond that of where children and families have been failed. And I have travelled around the country talking to families, and I too have heard so many stories. Of course.
I thank my honourable friend for his usual truly emotional and very caring speech. Whilst the Minister is travelling around the country, could she spend some time in West Somerset, where I have 2,500 children on the crisis list? Thank you.
Madam Deputy Speaker, I'd really appreciate the Honourable Member sending me an invitation to come and to speak to families. And the conversations that I've had have so often been parents battling, as the Honourable Member has set out, for years to get the support they know their children need, and the powerlessness they feel when they're watching their children struggle and fall behind.
At that point, will she give way?
Of course.
Thank her for giving way. I met with a constituent yesterday at my online advice surgery, Jenny Wilson, who has fought tirelessly for her son Maxwell to receive support from her local authority. He is without a formal diagnosis, and Jenny and other parents in my constituency would also like to know what more this government is doing to help those children who don't have a formal diagnosis, who are still being denied an EHCP or any additional support.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. And very often I hear that exact story of too much support being locked behind a diagnosis that takes years or a bureaucratic process. So the reforms that we've set out move investment directly into schools and into services that wrap around schools. So we're introducing 2 new layers of support, targeted and targeted plus, that will be available to children without that kind of battle for external validation, but something that teachers can draw on to support children in their classroom. So that's backed up by 2 new pieces of investment, 1.6 billion that's going directly into schools, and 1.8 billion that is going into a new experts at hand service to pay for speech and language therapists, occupational therapists, educational psychologists, and I'll just finish my point and then I'll give away, educational psychologists and specialist teachers and others who will be supporting schools and being available to draw on that support for young people like the one that you referenced.
I thank the Minister for giving way. I agree with what you're saying, and it's all good that it's coming in, but I simply don't understand that if you're so confident that these reforms, if the Minister is so confident that these reforms will work, why is it necessary to reduce children's rights? And I know that the Minister would like to say that we're not, but that is the view of KCs, that is happening, and that is authority that I personally trust. Because if the reforms succeed, in theory, demand for exercising those legal rights should naturally fall because families shouldn't need to use them. So it should be slightly irrelevant whether those legal rights are there or not if it's working, but it gives the families whose trust has collapsed the peace of mind that if it doesn't, in the worst case, they can go to tribunal and save their children's lives.
Madam Deputy Speaker, I think it's really important to say to families that we are expanding their support and their rights. So there will be new legal duties on schools to develop these new layers of support. The means support is available earlier. But if any...
Can I thank the Honourable Member for Dorking and Horley for bringing this debate forward today as well. It's so important that the lived experiences of parents are valued by local authorities and other services, and too often they're not. In 2023, 2 of my constituents in Beckham and Penge, Joe and Chris, tragically lost their son Leo to suicide. Leo was a bright, intelligent, inquisitive child He was also neurodivergent and struggled with his diagnosis of autism spectrum disorder. He's featured in the Times article that the Honourable Member mentioned in this debate. The coroner's report found into his death found he had been failed by multiple agencies over a sustained period of time. And I know that the Minister the Honourable Member kindly reached out to Joe and Chris to learn more about what happened to Leo and lessons that could be learned, and I'm really grateful to him for doing so. Will the Minister agree to meet with me so we can ensure the voices of parents like Joe and Chris are given the weight that they deserve?
I thank my honourable friend for that intervention and for sharing that tragic story. And of course, I would be willing to meet with my honourable friend to discuss this further. And these are the stories of failure that mean we need to do better for these families and change things. And we need a system where every school is set up to support children with special educational needs and disabilities. We're making it mandatory for every teacher to be trained to support children with special educational needs and disabilities, investing directly into schools to provide that support, setting out new national standards and new accountability for schools. But I think to my honourable friend's point, a really important point about still having that access to apply for that specialist support. So any individual who feels that their child is not getting the support they need through that targeted or targeted plus offer will be able to go forward for a needs assessment, and if they're unhappy with the needs assessment they will be able to go to the tribunal to challenge that decision. So there will be individual redress in the system, but it cannot just be for individual families to hold systems to account, because that is the system we have at the moment. Families having to take on legal battles, and if they don't have resource, it's not possible for them to do that. We have to, as DfE, as Ofsted, be holding institutions to account, and we are really clear that we will put more support in for councils. We're supporting them with 90% of their deficits, but with that support comes much stronger accountability, and stronger accountability now.
I thank the Minister for giving way. I've repeatedly raised with the DfE over the last year very serious misconduct by Surrey County Council, including concealing for over 14 months that they had the highest number of complaints in the country and reclassifying complaints as inquiries to reduce complaints volumes. As far as I'm aware, no disciplinary action has been taken, and this is categorically not a party political point, because firstly, it's a Conservatives County Council, and I actually know that, off the record, some Conservative County Councillors feel exactly the same way about their own administration. And I have been actually very impressed by the Department of Health, where I work with them on reforming the Mental Capacity Act, about their willingness to acknowledge misconduct and accountability and transparency in that case. But to be frank, all I've seen from the Department for Education is a culture of protecting one's own and cover-up. So when will serious action be taken against local authorities who commit misconduct on SEND and systematic law-breaking? And given what's happened with Surrey County Council, how can we have any confidence that when the Secretary of State for Education said that local authorities will be held to account, that they actually will?
Madam Deputy Speaker, following the letters that my honourable friend and others wrote to the Secretary of State, she instructed further intensive activity in Surrey, including a number of deep dives into the issues that were raised, which we'll be reporting back shortly. And there is SEND advisors going in, and there is very close monitoring happening of what's happening in Surrey and progress being monitored. But I really take that wider point that families have said to me and to members across this chamber, that there needs to be greater accountability on local authorities, and we recognise the challenging circumstances that local authorities have been acting within, but more investment is going in, and with that investment has to come that stronger monitoring, accountability and intervention when there's failure. And in the Schools White Paper, there were a number of areas that we are kind of strengthening what we're able to do. We're very clear that if there is repeated and long-term failure, that we will take send from local authorities. And also working with Disabled Children's Partnership, we're setting out new conditions where local authorities will need to learn from tribunal judgments, publish action plans on the back of tribunal judgments, and to show much greater transparency and action on the back of them. Sorry, I give way to my honourable friend.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. I want to thank the Minister for giving way, but I want to particularly thank my gallant friend for Dorking and Horley for securing this debate, but also the manner in which he introduced it. I know since he's come to this place, he's been a strong advocate for SEND families, and I thank him for that. I know, Madam Deputy Speaker, the Minister has heard from me about Zara Sharif before, and from my gallant friend from Dorking and Horley this afternoon. We are clearly very concerned about children's services in Surrey County Council. We would hope that intervention, we have shown that case that intervention is needed. If the Minister disagrees, could she please, I beg her to take away that we want to ensure that the culture of children's services at Surrey County Council is not transferred to West Surrey or East Surrey Council in the future. And if the government disagree with my assessment intervention is needed now, they need to intervene to ensure that culture is not transferred, that we have a fresh start that vulnerable children in our constituency so desperately need.
Madam Deputy Speaker, as I set out, we have appointed a SEND advisor who is offering that challenge to Surrey County Council, and will continue to monitor this very carefully, and I await the outcomes of these deep dives, and I will be meeting with parents along with my honourable friend to hear directly from them, and I'm very committed to continuing to work with all of the MPs to ensure that children are getting the support they need in Surrey. But as I said, more generally, ensuring that there is that strong accountability and monitoring of performance, as well as putting in that new investment and support. But I also just wanted to address the concern around my honourable friend mentioned with some young people who had previously had support under the new system not getting support. And I'd like to refer colleagues in the chamber to the draft annexes that set out the specialist provision packages. And I hope that they are reassuring that those specialist provision packages, as well as looking at children who have physical disabilities and kind of complex learning difficulties, two of the specialist provision packages focus on social and emotional needs and that interface with mental health. Come in.
I thank the Minister for giving way, and I fully believe that her heart is in the right place on this. But as I said, for me the test is what lawyers, not to big them up too much, what they are saying, what KCs are saying about this, and they are very clear, educational specialist lawyers, that this white paper is reducing children's rights. So I would love to support the white paper. Our country desperately needs reform in this area, as this debate has brought out. But if the Minister wants my support in particular, she is going to have to satisfy cases that there is no reduction in rights, and at the moment there is.
Madam Deputy Speaker, so we also attached to the Schools White Paper in the SEND consultation document is our own analysis of children's rights and all the areas that we are strengthening children's rights. And I just really have to be really clear that the intention of these reforms are to bring in more support earlier, to extend the rights that children have access to.
I really thank you for giving way, and she's been very generous with her time during this adjournment debate. I just want to reiterate the point about the families have already gone through the system. They've fought for the HCPs. Many of them have had to go through tribunals. There is a problem with support. A lot of parents sort of feel like they're doing it on their own. I come from a mental health background. I'm surprised that the system doesn't have what I would call a care coordinator to help support families go through this difficult process. And families are genuinely scared that the reforms that the government's putting forwards are going to lead to stripping away of support. In my constituency, we're served by Syrian borders, and it takes 1.5 years to get an autism diagnosis, even longer if you need medication for ADHD. Now, I've raised this in this place, the Department of Health and Social Care, but can you just reassure me that as part of the approach to SEND, she is, and her department is looking at the interface between education and health, because while I understand what you're saying about just because an absence of a diagnosis doesn't necessarily mean the child shouldn't be supported. We can have a bit of a debate about that. But for many children, a diagnosis is very, very important, and that needs to be timely, and treatment needs to be quick and effective. And my final bit, and I'm so before test patients, I'm the speaker, please would you come to see Meath School in my constituency, which is a special educational school in Oxfordshire. It is an amazing place. Every time I go there, I learn so much, and it'd be great if she would come along and see fantastic kids and teachers.
Madam Deputy Speaker, I have to confess, I think I have committed to go to every constituency in the country, so I will do my best, but I can't promise that it will be quick for every single ask, but I really do want to get to every community, and we will also be doing a number of online events as part of a consultation to make sure that everyone has the chance to feed in. But to those questions, firstly on diagnosis, I think it's really important that we are not saying that children don't need a diagnosis. There is a really important part of the system that diagnosis plays for children and young people, but we're saying that cannot and should not be a barrier to accessing support in the education system. And we need to be in a situation where schools have the tools to identify need, to respond to that need, and the resource and well-evidenced interventions to wrap support around children without a diagnosis. But, we are very committed to working with health colleagues on improving this whole system. And we're really clear in the SEND consultation document about that further work on accountability, not just for local authorities, but for ICBs as well. And the Honourable Member will know about the review that's happening in health on some of the inequalities in access to diagnosis. I think that the point made about care coordinators and parental support is a really well-made point. That's something I've heard a lot from families. Within the consultation, we have asked a question of how that can be better delivered. We're really committed to doing more in that space. There's lots of different ideas that have come forward from different disabled children's organisations and parents, but I really want to use the consultation to hear directly from parents what is most helpful for them. There's models where parents who've been through the system are paid to support other parents. There's SENDIAS that already exist, and so we really want to look at all the different models, and I would welcome insights from across the House. And then just some really important reassurance for those parents you talked about who are concerned about the changes. Firstly, any child that is at a special school will remain at special school as long as they want to. We have deliberately taken a very careful and staged approach, and we're putting investment up front, building a new system before we look to transition into that. And we are asking the Children's Commissioner to take an independent view of system readiness. And in terms of the children who have existing education health care plans, if any child does transition from an education health care plan, we're very clear that that needs to be onto an individual support plan with that wraparound support. But I'll give a final giveaway. So.
Minister, being very generous with your time. I mean, slightly tricky. I have a particular case, a horrendous case of a child in Dorking, 12 years old. They had their. I saw the mother a week after the second suicide attempt in September. CAMS wrote to the GP saying that their risk of suicide was low after that, 1 week later. There've been more self-harm incidents since then. This child has autism. Last week, they were rejected for an EHCP by the County Council. So I'm literally at my wit's end in terms of what to do on this case. So firstly, I'd be hugely grateful that the Minister was actually able to intervene, particularly in this case, if I wrote to her about it. But secondly, how would she envisage this child's situation improving after the reforms?
Madam Deputy Speaker, firstly, again, just a truly tragic case. Of course, I can't comment on it without knowing the full circumstances, but please do write to me. I think there's two ways. I think firstly, what the change will be that rather than having to wait for that support for years, that support will go in a lot earlier. And as well as the particular support for children with special educational needs and disabilities, we are working to bring mental health support more into schools to be able to support children and young people. But I mentioned the specialist provision packages and the drafts there because I think some of the children that I often hear from parents that don't have as much attention in the system are those children with social and emotional needs that are very internalising. You know, where it's externalising, you know, often sometimes those children are not well supported either, but where it's internalising, they get missed. And that was one of the groups that we very much focused on and, you know, their need for specialist provision. So for those children who can be supported in mainstream, we want to put that support in earlier, but we want to have pathways into specialist support for those who need them. Yes.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker, and I'll declare my usual interest that my wife is a special needs coordinator and one of our children has an EHCP. Can I thank the member for Dorking and Horley for bringing forward the debate. Now, from my constituents in Bexley and Crayford, they've seen our council have a safety valve agreement in London Borough of Bexley and an offset inspection of systemic failings, which hopefully we're about to come out of. So I've seen those things as a council, I've seen those things as a parent, and as the Minister knows, on these points, I'm the parent of twins, and I can tell you, despite having the HCP, the transfer for my daughter with the HCP was so much more stressful than it was for my other daughter. So I do welcome the changes that the Minister knows, and I just think there's a few things we still need to iron out in these conversations around transition, around support for schools, around the role of ICBs, absolutely. But can the Minister commit that through that consultation and through the legislative process we'll continue to hear those voices to get that package right? Because I do believe the current system, I know this firsthand, is absolutely broken and we've got to get it right for these families.
Thank you to my honourable friend and for his long-term advocacy on this really critical issue and how much he has inputted into our work to improve the system. And I'm really glad that he asked that question because that was where I wanted to finish, which is with the voices of children and young people and families. You know, we are absolutely committed to that accountability that has been asked for, and we'll be shortly writing to all local authorities asking them to develop, send improvement plans, and we'll be monitoring that very carefully, and also ensuring that the voices of families are part of the intelligence that we receive about performance. Yeah.
Very generous of time and apologies for being late for the debate. Business was going more rapidly than I'd expected. But with the new developments that are taking place, many of us, I think, will strongly believe that it's really important that children are educated as close to home as possible. And unfortunately, I have a piece of casework in my constituency where one child is doing a 3-hour round-trip journey every single day just to get to school, which I think is unacceptable. And I wondered if with the new changes that are going to happen, if there might be an option to change that, and perhaps if the Minister could just help expand on that. Thank you.
Madam Deputy Speaker, I think that is such a critical point, and we have heard too many stories of that long travel times, and you know, for the stress that provokes for children having to be in transport and how that holds them back. So we're determined that in every community we have access to that support, both inclusive schools but also the specialist places and that range of specialist places that are needed. And that's why we put 3.7 billion into creating those specialist places around the country, but also why we're doing that work on specialist provision packages to ensure that each area has that range of provision. So we are absolutely determined to build up that local provision so children can grow up close to their friends. And I've spoken to young people who've been in the position that my honourable friend describes, and they come back to their communities at 18. They don't have support networks, they don't have friends. It's so hard to build a life, and that absolutely has to change, and we're determined to do so. So we've set out our plans after over a year of engagement, but we want to hear from all of the constituents of the members here and beyond. I'm personally committed to travelling and speaking to different voices around the country, and we know, and I've heard from all the different contexts and how this works in rural communities in different parts of a country. It's critical that we get this right. It's a generational opportunity to make change for families that have been let down, and I'm really determined that this is a full consultation, that it's an open one. So please do, everyone who's here today and listening, help us to spread the word, to hear the voices of families. And I feel really deeply, as I'm sure my honourable friend does, the responsibility of having heard these stories and changing things for those families. And I'm really committed to working with members across the House to get this right. Thank you.
And it would be remiss of me not to extend an invitation to the Minister to St Edward's School in my constituency. The question is that this House do now adjourn. As many as of that opinion say aye. Aye. The ayes have it. Order, order.